What's the worst damage you've caused? Story 1. Okay, nothing hugely major, but years ago, 97, I was on tour with a small musical theater production. I was the technical director. We were in a chalet-style hotel in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They gave me a non-smoking room, but at the time I was a pack-a-day smoker, so I smoked in the room. A few hours later, I heard a high-pitched beeping. The source is hard to discern because of the high-pitched ceilings in the room. I look up and see in the light a cloud of cigarette smoke floating near the peak of the angled ceiling, and nearby, the smoke detector, which has a little red flashing light. Dang, it seems I set off the smoke alarm. I immediately jump up on the bed, grab a pillow, and begin fanning over my head. It was a high ceiling, and I'm 6'2". Beep, beep, beep. The thing wouldn't stop, but oddly enough, the main alarms are not going off. The hotel is not being cleared. Beep, beep, beep. After minutes of fanning, I can't take it anymore. I start throwing my shoes at the smoke alarm. A few good dings in the drywall later, I scored a direct hit or two. The alarm was damaged, now hanging by the wall by the attached wires. AC alarm, not batteries. Beep, 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 frick. The dang thing won't shut up. In a rage, I grabbed the aluminum pipe frame suitcase stand, the kind that folds, by one leg, and I start jumping on the bed, swinging at the peak of each leap towards the infernal machine. With each miss, the black rubber feet leave a black streak across the off-white walls. Finally, I scored a direct hit. The alarm flew off of its wires across the room, and I swear to the flying spaghetti monster, landed in the waste can near the television. I'm elated, momentarily. Then I realized, beep, 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 it's still there. Does it have a battery backup? What the hell? I get down off the bed, bend over the waste can, only to realize that the 80s-era hotel television, which had an LED clock on the face, had a built-in alarm clock, which was going off. I hit the faded off button, and the beeping finally stopped. I don't think I mentioned it at checkout, and I never heard another thing about it. True story. Too long didn't read? I thought the smoke alarm in my hotel room was going off, trashed the walls trying to stop it, only realizing it was the alarm clock. I don't know about you, but I'm picturing Rowan Atkinson in my head. You know, Mr. Bean. This sounds like a skit that he would definitely have done. I can just imagine it, too. I almost want to go back and rewatch Mr. Bean to see if he actually did something like this. Story 2. I was living in a duplex in Lahaina, Maui. One day, my next-door neighbor came over and told me to come look at something. Outside, between our two units, was a standpipe with a water spigot on the end. It stood about 2 feet high and was only a couple inches from the house, which was a cinder block structure on a concrete slab. He took the standpipe in his hand and pulled it to the side so it was about at a 45-degree angle. Water came gushing forth from under the house. Well, cool, we thought. Not that he did not turn the faucet, he turned the standpipe like a lever. Note that. So in a few days, whenever we had a visitor, we'd show them our amazing water pipe. Reader, you already know where this is going. Yes, it happened on my watch. I turned the standpipe, and the water came out. Then I turned it back, and the water kept coming out. Then it fell over. The pipe was broken, and the water was coming out faster than ever. Fortunately, the landlord lived next door. Unfortunately, he wasn't home. There weren't any cell phones in those days, and nobody at either duplex had a phone. Not that it would have done any good, because I had no idea who to call or what to do. We lived about 4 blocks from town, which was a street along the waterfront. So I rode my bike down to use a phone. I don't remember who I called, but everybody told me somebody else to call, until I was calling a sugar refinery. Then I looked up our street, and yes, here it came, the water. A nice, fat, steady stream of water. I watched it run into the gutter, down a drain, and then I walked across the street to watch the water leave the drain pipe and onto the beach. It formed a little channel and entered the Pacific Ocean. And I didn't know what to do, so I just sat and tried to wake up from the nightmare. That didn't work either, so I figured I'd best go back to the duplex and start packing my goods. The landlord was waiting for me with a shovel. I'd been ratted. The digging was pretty easy because of all the water washing the soil out, but the break was a long way back. Some plumber guy came a little later, and when he arrived, I made myself scarce in the cane field behind the house to check my plants, 'cause I needed something. As I sit here and recall this tragic memory, it occurs to me that when I lived at that place, there had been an earthquake. I never thought of it before writing this. That was what weakened the pipe. Maybe. The thing that ticked me off about it was that everybody knew about that pipe, but it had to break when I was demonstrating it, and I was the one who took all the blame. But at least the landlord didn't bill me for it. That's a good thing. I mean, anybody else, especially in this day and age, you would get hit for all of those costs. Those landlords would not really give you any leeway on this. I'm sorry, they got to keep their profit somehow. Story 3. When my brother and I were 5 and 4, respectively, we were little devils and refused to go to bed when we were put there. My parents eventually gave up and just went to bed. They were exhausted as they'd had a dinner party that evening. I promptly went into the lounge and went out of my parents' entire cassette tape collection, including the memoirs of my grandmother's escape from Germany in 1939, and proceeded to pull out all the tape from the cassettes and play with it. My brother, in the meantime, decided that he was hungry and that he would like a fried egg. In his 5-year-old wisdom, he got out an egg in a frying pan and put them on the stove and turned on an element. Nothing happened with the element that he was looking at, so he turned to another one. This time, the heat turned on, and once the pan was hot enough, he started frying the egg. Unfortunately, the first element he turned on had a wooden chopping board which smoldered until the heat reached my mom's food processor, which promptly started burning and melting and resulted in lots of dark black smoke and fire. My brother took the toddler down to my parents' bedroom and said, "Daddy, why is there smoke in the kitchen?" And apparently my dad went from horizontal in bed to vertically and halfway down the corridor in about 2 seconds flat. The fire was quite easily put out at the expense of my parents' nice crockery that was soaking in a bucket nearby. My dad just picked it up and threw it, plates, water and all, on the fire. In photos of the damage that we had to take for insurance purposes, there's a sort of twisted black mess of the stove and bench area, and then right in the middle of it all is a perfectly cooked fried egg. The greatest story ends. I love the image of the little perfection of the egg, which started everything, surrounded just by chaos. It was kind of lost in the plot of the story, but what happened to the tapes? If anyone remembers, with cassette tapes, it was possible to take a pencil, insert it into one of the holes in the cassette tape, and use that to wind the tapes back. Hopefully he didn't fold on the tape that hard, because that is probably going to damage the sound that's on there. But yeah, there was a lot of destruction from these two in just this short amount of time. Story 4. While in college, I spent several summers working in a salmon cannery in Alaska, and for a few seasons worked on the overnight cleaning crew. I cleaned fillers, these huge industrial revolution-looking behemoths that cut salmon into pieces and put it in cans. The final stage of cleaning these involved climbing into a cavity under the machine where the blade assembly normally sat. It was removed nightly for sharpening. We used thin wire picks, about 12 inches long, to get any last fish parts out of the machine. Inside the cavity was a big drive arm that drove the part of the machine that fed fish to the blades. This arm sat right across your chest as you worked in the cavity, and made for a handy shelf if you needed to set down your pick for a minute. Of course, one day, I left the pick on the drive arm. The line mechanics came in and installed the blade assembly, which consisted of about 16 circular blades about 3 times the diameter of a basketball and which rotated at ridiculously high RPMs as the machine ran. So, the mechanic turns on the machine only to hear a god-awful screeching sound as the pick was fed into the blades. It wiped out about half the blades on the assembly, and with no suitable backup, I took out a quarter of the plant's production capacity for the day. And this was a plant that processed 1 million pounds of very perishable fish per day. The head mechanic who heroically got this thing repaired by the next day pitched me a lot of hell, but never ratted me out. Holy hell. That might take the cake for most monetary damage caused if the fish that were going to be processed expired overnight. Story 5. My little brother and I saw someone make and use a Molotov cocktail in some action movie. We thought it was the coolest thing ever, and determined we could do the same thing and be little bad ones. Our first attempt yielded disappointing results. Somehow we neglected to realize the bottles had to be made of glass. Once that was sorted out, we tested our new creations on a big oak tree in a clearing about a mile into the forest behind our house. The bottle full of gasoline exploded just like we expected, and burned that 100-foot old-growth oak down in less than an hour. We were amazed, but soon became terrified when flaming limbs began falling off the tree and setting fire to the tall, dry summer grass nearby. The fire quickly spread to nearby trees and did the only thing we could think to do: run like heck. That inferno burned for about the next 48 hours until the fire department could finally put it out. It destroyed about 40 acres of the forest land, an abandoned house, and part of a horse farm, resulting in some freaked-out horses and a lot of charred fences. Naturally, we never came forward because we were cowardly little buttholes. But we both went on to volunteer with fire departments wherever we've lived to atone for our stupidity and carelessness. In high school, we used to go out to my friend's farm and attempt totally awesome fire-based destruction every weekend. Our experiment with Molotovs began with my friend setting his jacket on fire by pouring the fuel down his back while trying to throw one incorrectly. Being set on fire helps people learn. Story 6. I posted this in another thread, but it fits here as well. When I was 11 or 12, I went to visit my sister in Germany. We were getting ready for a dinner party she was throwing later that night, so we were busily getting the final items we needed at the local market. It was a bit hectic. As it was a little market, they only had these tiny baskets for all your stuff and no carts, so she asked me to hold the bottle of champagne. As we were waiting in line, I was being a stupid kid and trying to balance the bottle by the punt, little divot on the bottom, on one finger. Naturally, I messed it up and dropped the bottle. Anyone who's ever dropped a champagne bottle knows those suckers explode with force and a lot of noise. This, in a foreign country, is embarrassing enough as it is. But then this guy next to me cries out and collapses on the ground, clutching his knee. Blood is squirting out from all over, making a big pool. This lady starts screaming, and I just stand there not knowing what the heck happened. Turns out a shard of glass had gone under his kneecap and severed an artery and some ligament. He ended up having to go to the hospital that day and have surgery. The cherry on top? Dude was a mountain climber, and he was leaving to climb the Matterhorn the next day. One of his ropes was frayed, and you saved the guy's life. Oh, that is just so tragic. I think the only saving grace we have in this was in a foreign country. So they probably had much better and much more affordable medical care than pretty much anywhere else. Hopefully. I'm not sure exactly which country this is. What did they say? Was it Germany here? Yeah, it was in Germany. So yeah, definitely better and definitely more affordable health care. But yeah, it sucks that he didn't get to climb the Matterhorn. I wonder if he recovered from his injuries and was able to climb up later on in his life. I hope so. Story 7. Less than a month after my 16th birthday, I totaled my dad's boss's car. My dad had gotten a promotion, and as a reward, his boss lent him his BMW 740iL for a week as a replacement for his usual work van. The weekend before he was to return the car, he went on a trip with my stepmother to see his family, and they decided to take her car. I wanted to drive that car so badly, so I ended up just taking it out for a cruise to the local mall to meet up with some of my friends. After showing off for a while, I picked up my brother at the movies, and we left to head home. I was following a guy I knew from school, and as we approached a left-hand turn onto the highway on-ramp, I just blindly followed him through without checking the light, and boom! Within an instant, I was staring at a cloud of airbag dust and could hear dings and beeps from the dashboard and smell the distinct aroma of antifreeze. At the end of the day, the man in the car I hit was in an older car and wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He ended up spending 6 weeks in the hospital and a year in physical therapy. The 740 was a total write-off, but it was covered by insurance. My dad framed a copy of the claim and hung it up in the garage in front of the car. Total cost? $59,549. My brother ended up looking like he's sparring with Mike Tyson for the next week. Nice. Story 8. Not me, but 3 kids went up on a hill near where I lived and decided to play with fire. They ended up burning down about 40 houses, including mine. Most of the houses were leveled to the ground with nothing left but ashes. The evacuation was quick, and many people lost pets, and dozens of cars and other vehicles were also torched. My neighbors were about 12 Mexicans living in one house, and they didn't believe in banks and lost all their money. About $7,000 that was in a jar in their basement. It wasn't a rich neighborhood, and many didn't have insurance, so most people became homeless. The kids in question came from a rich neighborhood, and from what I hear, had no remorse whatsoever. Neither them or their parents had to pay a single penny. Kids didn't even get a slap on the wrist for what they did. I was just a kid, and my family had to live in a car for a few days before the Red Cross put us up in a motel for a couple months before we could find another place to live. It wasn't a huge town, and with 40 families looking for a place to live, it took a while to find a place. If you're ever looking to give money, the Red Cross is always a good place to give. That and community action. Well, revenge should be cold enough to serve up by now. Story 9. Probably not exactly what you're looking for, but I worked at Sears in high school. One day in May, a woman came in and tried to return a CD player that she purchased during a Christmas sale. That's 5 months after the fact, and it's got no packaging, no receipt, and no charger. I politely told her that there was nothing I could do for her, at which point she called me a little feces and started yelling at me. My manager comes over to see who's screaming, and we stand there and listen to her berate me for a little while longer. The manager totally caves in and gives her a refund. She hands me her Sears card, and I process the refund while she smiles at me. Now, before we proceed, there are 2 important things that you need to know about the Sears I worked at. All details, including full credit card info of a transaction, could be printed out via the POS after the fact. Manager override codes were not secret. Fast forward about 30 minutes. She's left the store, and my manager is AWOL. I hop onto our fancy internal ordering system and look up the most expensive item I can find. A $3,999 lawn tractor from John Deere. I change the quantity to 10, and punch in her address and Sears card number. The system comes back and complains about the amount of the order and says it needs a manager to override code, which I know. So I overrode it, placed the order, and chuckled at the thought of $40,000 worth of lawnmowers showing up at this shrew's house. I almost don't think this story belongs in this thread. I think it belongs in the petty revenge category. But I want to know if this actually went through. Did they get those things delivered to that house? Did they actually show up? Or was it spotted beforehand? I want it to be shown up. I want it to have shown up there. I want about all that tractor equipment to show up at this woman's house. Story 10. I once worked in the gaming machine room of a very busy hotel. I say once because I only worked one 8-hour shift and was promptly fired. My job for the shift was at the cashier's desk, exchanging coin winnings for pokey slot machines into cash notes, or taking people's cash and converting it to coins. I was in charge of a little machine that weighed the coins and told you how much cash to return to the customer. It had 2 settings, calibrated to the weight of Australian $1 and $2 coins. I was told to select red for $1 coins, blue for $2 coins. About 5 minutes into the shift, I pressed red, freaked out, and pushed blue, which was what I was aiming for in the first place. The screen started blinking, so I pressed blue again, and it stopped. I continued my shift, working through the line of people that was rarely less than 3 people deep. Towards the end of my shift, another employee, Dave, came to replenish my till and take away some coins. I had several times been replenished with cash notes. The computer spat out its report, and Dave looked a little confused. Quite simply, the bag of coins and the number on the report didn't add up. Not even close. Turns out, I had reset the calibration of the weighing machine. I had been handing over fistfuls of cash due to the coin scales reporting the wrong amount. I was never privy to the exact amount, but Dave did tell me on the way to the exit that it was over $15,000. Too long didn't read? I accidentally reset a coin weighing machine and overpaid gambling clients to the tune of $15,000 in one shift. Story 11. A couple years ago, I was living at my mother's house, and my sister left her neurotic rat terrier with me for a week while she and our mother went on a business trip. The dog was used to going for 4 walks a day and being coddled and spoiled beyond all description. I was going to school and working nights, so his needs were far beyond my ability to provide. I walked him before school, fed him, and left, and then would walk him between school and work. After a couple of days of this treatment, the dog expressed his displeasure with me by pooping all over the house. I was frantically trying to clean it up before being late to school, and I just spread borax paste wherever he'd left a mess, figuring a dog, like a cat or a small child, is smart enough not to eat borax. I was wrong. When my sister came home from her business trip, I was at school, and her dog was almost unalive. I got the cream out of my life as she rushed him to the vet. The dog lived, but by then I was so freaked out by almost unaliving my sister's furry child and the subsequent reaming. I packed up and moved out when her back was turned a couple days later. So not only did I almost unalive a dog, I then caused more havoc when my family interpreted me moving out as me committing self-unaliving. Like a boss.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 12. Back when I was a dumb kid living in Italy, a bunch of friends and I decided to play hide and seek inside one of the empty villas in our parco. Since the front door was locked and there were bars on the windows, we decided to break a hole in the side of the wall. Once inside, we discovered that the laborers who worked for the landlord kept their power tools in there. We went full idiot and completely destroyed everything inside that house. One of us came up with the idea that if we hit the big water tank outside with a pickaxe, it would explode. After being disappointed by cracking the tank in half with no explosion, We decided the only way to cause an explosion was to pour gasoline all over the furnace. Before we had a chance to throw those sparkling sticks at it, the SPs and carabinieri showed up and ruined our fun. Too long didn't read? My mom gave me $5 for ice cream, and I ripped it in half, making it into an airplane. You and your friends are psychotic douchebags. This felt like it went along with the story about the kids who burned down all those houses. Was there any consequence for their actions? Or did they just get dismissed with, oh, kids will be kids or something, or a slap on the wrist? Story 13. When I was in the 6th grade, I caught a dried-up tobacco field on fire. I had a knockoff of one of those Rambo knives and for a few days was high on the thought of being a bad one with nothing but my knife and all the stuff stuffed inside the handle. I was trying to show my sister how I could create a fire using 2 sticks. When she wasn't looking, I struck a match, started a small fire, blew the match out, and tossed it behind me. Of course, while we were staring at my small, deliberate fire, flames were rapidly spreading all around us. This was right off a busy highway, and suddenly there were folks all over the place swatting the fire with their floor mats. In the end, a huge chunk of the field was completely charred, and to this day my entire family believes I was able to accomplish all of that by rubbing 2 sticks together. Quit arson around, or somebody will get hurt. Story 14. When I was a kid, I went to my cousin's house one weekend. We were playing outside when a neighboring kid approached us, telling us that the trailer parked in the adjacent property was being thrown away by the owners and that we could do whatever we wanted to it. After realizing it was locked up, we proceeded to find whatever we could, hammers, crowbars, etc., to smash the locks and get inside. After multiple futile attempts to smash the locks, we started to try our way in by just ripping a giant hole in the door. We ended up messing this trailer up pretty badly before my aunt came outside in a storm of rage and stopped us. After being caught and questioned, the kid that convinced us to do it claimed he was only doing what we told him and had no idea what was going on. It was his parents' trailer. I bet that kid has some great stories these days, if he lived. Story 15. Trip to Spain with my high school. Beer plus dishwasher soap and giant fountain in the middle of the town equals chaos. They closed the main roads the next day. They brought in fire trucks from a neighboring town just to clean up the bubbles. Local newspaper blamed American tourists. We were Canadian. So Americans want to be Canadian so people will like them, and Canadians get called American when they do something American. Son of a shrew. I remember when I was a kid in camp and we were in teams for a belly flop contest. Part of the score from the judges was on our physical presentation. We didn't know what to do, and about the only thing we could think of at the last minute to decorate our flopper was cover him in shaving cream. It took a long time after our diver to clean out the pool. I think it was closed down for a few days, and that ticked off a lot of campers that wanted to swim. Story 16. Homemade bombs. 9 years old. My grandfather's black powder is used for refilling shotgun shells. Battery-powered clock. Drilled-out light bulb, also battery-powered, with a short fuse attached to the element and duct-taped it to a 3-foot-tall wide oak tree. Huge explosion destroyed a tree and set fire to a field behind a nursing home. Tried to put the fire out with my jacket, which resulted in me fanning the flames. Then I ran home. State police, helicopters, and fire trucks arrived at the scene. Grandfather smelled fire on my clothes and dragged my butt out there to fess up to what I had done. Ain't doing that mess again. Lesson frickin' learned. Story 17. Once in a while in college, there was this cute girl I used to talk to. On the day the results came out, I saw her sitting, crying. She had failed her papers and would probably be sent back. I went and checked the results. It seemed she had passed. I ran back to her with the good news. She was very happy. We went back to the results together. To my horror, I realized I had made a mistake earlier, and she had really failed. I was speechless when she boarded the bus in tears. Awesome. Story 18. I drove my car through my front door. My front end was in my living room. It put quite a damper on my morning. Did anyone else have the full house memory where Michelle drove Joey's car through the wall into the kitchen, and she tried to tell DJ, "There's a car in the kitchen." DJ responded, "Yeah, and there's a bus in the bathroom." But there was no bus in the bathroom. Story 19. I almost choked a family friend to termination when I was a kid. We were playing around, wrestling and roughhousing, and I locked my arm around his neck, pretending to put him in a sleeper hold. I thought he was just acting when he went all limp, so I kept clinging to his back with my arm across his throat. I had no idea that I'd actually choked him unconscious. Only my mom freaking the hell out alerted me to the fact that no, he wasn't pretending, and yes, he was unconscious. I'm sure he lost a few brain cells because of me. It seems like you should have gone into wrestling. That sounds like one heck of a sleeper hold. Story 20. There was a house for sale in my neighborhood that was empty for about 3 months. During that period, a group of friends and I push a huge freaking boulder into the deep end of the swimming pool. To be clear, it was poised right on the edge, begging to be pushed. Fast forward another few months, and a friend not involved in the incident tells me his dad just bought a new house. Only downside to the new house is a boulder in the pool. Whoops. Your friend's dad has terrible taste in real estate if he lives in a goddamn boulder in a pool. Story 21. The first time I was drunk with my friends, I stacked one side of a bench press bar with all the weight I could. The bar flipped over like a freaking banshee, broke the wall, and smashed through a mirror in the bathroom on the other side of the wall. My friend, his house, punched me in the nose and I started bleeding profusely. I thought it was awesome, so I proceeded to collect the blood in my cupped hand and use it as finger paint to draw penises all over the wall. Needless to say, we aren't friends anymore. Wow, you're a butthole. Story 22. In my younger days, a few friends and I caused a ton of damage with action figures and some bottle rockets. We were having a sleepover and decided to take to the surrounding woods and fields around the house with our action figures and bottle rockets in hand. While walking around, we stumbled across a barn about half a mile away from the house. We entered the barn and decided we would stage our epic battle inside. I shot a bottle rocket at one of the action figures. It missed its target and instead lit some hay on fire that ignited into a blazing ball of fire. We ran for the hills. The next morning, our friend's mom was watching the local news. One of the headlines spoke of a stampede of cattle that destroyed a local farmer's living room. Apparently, the cattle had been scared into stampeding due to the farmer's barn that had burned down the night before. We never spoke of that day till now. I know what you did. Story 23. A friend of mine lived across the street from a courthouse. One night, we went on the roof and started launching bananas at the courthouse with a water balloon launcher. They were all landing on the courthouse steps. Then, the most glorious shot I had ever seen. It started as a normal shot, but at the halfway mark, it went up to the glass dome. High-velocity bananas in glass domes don't mix. The banana shattered a glass panel in the dome. All those years of teenage shenanigans, that was the greatest. Story 24. I wrote off a piece of commercial-grade machinery once for the lulz. I work in a mall, and in the basement there are huge trash compactors, kind of like the ones on the back of garbage trucks. Press a button, and a big metal plate crushes the contents of the bin. The manager told me to throw out a big piece of metal, approximately a meter long, 6 inches wide, 1/4 inch thick, because we couldn't use it in the store. I decided to stick it in the compactor to see what would happen. The discarded piece of metal won. The machine first made a whirring sound, then a bang. I was too busy walking away nonchalantly to check on it further. The next day, the machine was taped off with caution tape and had to be replaced over the next week. I can't imagine how much a commercial-grade trash compactor like that costs. Story 25. Mine is, a friend and I accidentally set a park on fire, which spread to an elementary school and a forest. We were too freaked out to call 911 and ended up doing a tremendous amount of damage. Worst I've seen? A colleague pushed out the wrong image update to every server and desktop at Merrill Lynch, taking every single one out for a span of 2 to 3 days. He was fired and sued. I think our company's insurance policy was hit really, really hard. Story 26. Broke a kid's leg when I was younger, around 14, during a game of soccer. I panicked and left without helping or apologizing. Since then, I've been trying to redeem myself by helping people whenever I can, although I really haven't been given the chance to really help someone in immediate need. I know one day I'm gonna be thrown a major curveball, and I hope I'll be ready for it. Story 27. When I was little, I wanted to play the flight simulator on my cousin's family computer. It was an early Macintosh. I had no computer of my own back then, so I had no idea how to open the hard drive. I remember my uncle showing me how he deleted things by dragging them to the trash can. I tried that, but it didn't work. Later that day, there was a big ruckus, and everybody took turns yelling at me. I ended up hiding in the bathroom. Story 28. When I was in high school, I stole some stuff and did some other drunkenly stupid stuff. I don't really want to go into detail, but it led to my dad getting fired. It really sucked, too. That was the first job he'd had in several years at that point. He basically threw himself on his sword so that his employer wouldn't call the cops on me. I try not to think about this much, but I felt guilty for 13 years. Story 29. I erected a tower crane with a base that was improperly engineered. 2 months later, it fell, collapsing one building, damaging 2 others, unaliving 1 man, injuring the operator, and shutting down the job. I think that the ballpark financial end was around $20 million in damage, but it's all undisclosed. I wasn't the reason that there was a failure, but the damage was ridiculous. Story 30. My friend's sister forgot to put her car in park when she pulled into the driveway. It's a pretty steep incline, and she walked in and started to get dinner ready and heard a crash across the street. The car had rolled out of the driveway, crossed the street, jumped the curb, and stopped in the neighbor's living room. Story 31. Had a coworker drop a tube of compound worth about $10,000 on the floor, then tried to rescue it with a pipette. At that point, it was okay, but she lost half of it. Then she tried to filter it with a filter syringe. Turns out DMSO causes those to turn into glue. So anyways, $10K of novel cancer pharmaceuticals down the drain. Story 32. My car broke down and I didn't have enough time to get all the way to the shoulder before it stopped. I blocked the middle 2 lanes at the El Toro Y on the 405 freeway at rush hour. I figure many man-hours of work were collectively lost. Story 33. I accidentally blew up a 6,000-gallon tanker truck and demolished the workshop we were in. About $120,000. Achievement unlocked. Story 34. Material damage, not so much. But psychological damage? Since I'm a girl, probably more than I'll ever know. Come back to me! Story 35. I accidentally set fire to the living room rug when I was 8 years old. Surprisingly, my parents went easy on me. Nice try, time traveler. Story 36. People say I missed a few things that caused international damage, but it doesn't affect me. At first, I was confused. Then I read your username. Story 37. I've downloaded a car once. The American automobile business has yet to recover from the damage. You wouldn't download a car. Story 38. I know this is kinda subtle, but a few weeks ago, I bled on a brand new $10,000 green screen. If only you were a predator. Story 39. Back in August of '88, I crashed 1,507 computers in one day. Yo, man, this is zero cool. Story 40. There was this one time when I farted and some volcano in Iceland erupted. You're the frickin' butterfly. Story 41. One time I was working on this oil rig in the Gulf. Boom! MacGruber! Story 42. Well, according to the RIAA and MPAA, I may have caused trillions of dollars in damages at this point. Story 43. After reading all of this, it makes me wonder how the world still goes on. Story 44. Once I wore a pretty revealing top and an earthquake happened. Story 45. 8D10 plus 11. Best comment here, I reckon. Story 46. I broke a $250,000 laser. Go on.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.